Okay, this week is all about the control layer, and the control layer is where all of the actions happen in our programs. The model layer is where all the objects are, and they can have methods that will do actions on that particular class, or even between classes. But the control layer is really where all the business logic should happen. If there's any sort of conditionals or any complex logic, that really needs to go in the control layer. And a lot of our control methods will be kicked off from the view layer based on the menu items. But that doesn't mean that every menu item needs a controller method or that menus are controllers. Those are part of our view layer. So in my save the city example, the superhero city, whatever it was, I'm going to have a couple different controllers. The first one that's pretty obvious that most people will have is going to be a movement controller, right? This controller is going to be responsible for taking the player, getting their current location if they're moving north, moving them north, a tile in the map or location in the map, throwing the errors and handling all of the data that's happening there. So I'm going to add new methods to this, like move north, move east, move south, and move west. The movement controller may also end up being responsible for what happens when you reach a location, or it will kick off the other controller that is responsible for what happens at that location. So, for instance, well, first of all, I have to add the relationships as well. We know the movement controller will need to deal with locations, and it will need to deal with the player, and possibly and probably the map. So let's just add the relationships there just in case. Okay, I think I've got everything. One other controller that I'll be using for my game is a battle controller. And this controller will get kicked off when the player lands in a location that contains a villain. And so we'll make sure that when we're battling, we'll be using heroes, and we'll be using villains, and we'll be using the player. So again, another pretty well-used controller, a controller that uses a lot of classes. It actually also will be using items as well. So our battle controller will have methods like player attack and villain attack. So when the player has an option of using an item or making an attack, and maybe we should have another operation that's use item. So the player will be able to take one of those actions, and the battle controller will perform the action and calculate all the remaining hit points of everybody and take care of all of that. One controller that everyone should have is a controller that handles some sort of math operation, because the test matrix doesn't work well without a math operation. So I'm going to create a class that's going to be, I'm going to just call this a collection controller. So when the player lands on a hero tile, before they can add the hero to their inventory of heroes, they'll have to answer a math question. And so I'm going to add an attribute or an operation that's maybe we'll have one that's calculate work. So this would be like a question where if one worker can do the job in 2 hours and worker B can do the job in 6 hours, how long will it take both of them to work on it together? So calculate work time. Don't know why a hero would be asking our player that, but you know, the games don't have to make sense. Another one of my problems could be calculate volume. So maybe the hero is asking the player to calculate the volume of some sort of sphere or cylinder or some complex shape before they can add them. And you can add any number of methods. In my game, I left it pretty open-ended where it could be anything. And this is actually only going to have an association between the player and the hero because the player will be able to add the heroes if they answer the question correctly, otherwise they won't. So those are my only 3 controllers that I think I'll be using. There's a good chance I'll add another one. You may want to add a game controller class that connects to pretty much every model item, or at least the player and the map, which will at least just maintain the state of the player and the map. And that's up to you. But what you'll need to do is look through your requirements document, especially find the methods that have to do with a math calculation, and put those into their own controller or different controllers. I know the Star Wars one has like a building lightsaber, so that'll have a controller where you actually build the lightsaber. The Desert Escape game has the filling the pit one. That would be like the I can't remember what location that's at. There's a certain specific location where that controller will come into play, so you'd have a relationship to that specific location as well as that might actually even be it. And so each of your games is going to have different controllers. That's totally fine. But this is just to give you an idea of what controllers are for. They contain only methods, no properties. And again, I'm not too picky on the relationships. I'm just going to be looking at your controllers and making sure you have methods there that are going to work for your game. And if you don't have a math calculation or a specific one, feel free to make one up. I have no problem with that. So this is the video on the visual paradigm part of the assignment. I will go on to the test matrix part next, and I think there was one other part to the assignment, so I'll also add a video for that as well when I look that up. But yeah, hope this helps a little bit. Helps you understand kind of what controllers are for. It's where the business logic happens, right? If there's any sort of logic or exceptions or anything that could happen, we try and avoid putting that in the view. But if there are some cases where it just makes sense to put it in the view, but this is the controllers are where methods are going to happen, where you're going to take actions. Okay, so this is part 1 of the 3 videos I'll be posting this week.